everybody. Well, I have to tell you, I'm extremely excited about today. I have immensely enjoyed thinking about today and just this whole series. Katie first asked me and said, could you think about a woman that you'd like to share it on? And it took me weeks to choose somebody because I was very excited by all the options. So we have landed on one, and we're going to get straight into it just for the sake of time. And we're going to talk today about the story of Rahab. And you may have heard of Rahab. She's kind of one of the less known but more well-known, you know what I mean? And it's just such an amazing story. And I truly have been so ministered by her story this week. So I hope that you will be too. So this is just a beautiful portrait of Rahab. And we're going to jump straight into the next slide so we get right into the story and find where we first meet Rahab. So we meet her in Joshua 2. And the context is that, the Israelites in the Old Testament are there. They're waiting to come into the Promised Land. And there is this city, town called Jericho. And Rahab lives in this city of Jericho. And they have sent 2 Israelite spies to go into the city of Jericho. And we find this verse in Joshua 2. Then Joshua, who was one of the leaders, the leader in Israel, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. So Rahab was a prostitute, as the Bible tells us many times, and she likely would have been sold into prostitution as a young girl by her family, largely due to economic reasons. This would not have been a choice that she would have made. Indeed, it's not often the choice of many women and girls who are all over the world today. It's largely due to economic reasons, or they're sold because of their family. And because of this, as is also the case of many women and girls in this situation today in the world, she would have been seen as secondary value. She was a conduit for her family to have means to live. So she enables them to have, a survival. And that means that, she actually had very little choice in her life, not just maybe that decision, but in her life. Her life was constrained. She wouldn't have had many options, and she wouldn't have had many ways to get out. And because of that, as we begin this story, I really want us to just land in that moment that actually, here is a woman of little choice, little agency, probably sold by her family. How painful that is, just straight up. Abused every day and judged. She would have been judged. She would have been seen as less of, with less respect. In that culture, actually, even more so in Israelite culture, prostitution was completely immoral. You wouldn't want to hang out with somebody like Rahab. And so I put before you that actually, these spies, you think, how would they have seen her? How would they have seen her? Probably sinful, little worth, a commodity, dirty. They probably would have judged her. As you kind of see in this picture, what would they have thought about this woman in red? We don't know that she was in red, but, it's important to hold that place in the beginning of the story. And yet, how does God see her? I was really thinking about this. I was thinking, does God see her as a prostitute? The Bible, every time it talks about Rahab almost, says Rahab the harlot or Rahab the prostitute. And I have conflicting feelings about this because one part of me thinks, actually, it's amazing that it's there because, the Israelites wouldn't have wanted to include her in the story. There's nothing of glory to have included a woman of Rahab in this story, actually. So to actually say the level of her situation and then the level of transformation, which we will see, and the lineage of grace that she becomes part of, is actually quite incredible. It actually says the beauty and the transformation of the whole story, and that's amazing. But at the same time, it also reflects a very patriarchal nature of the way that we see her and define her, Rahab the prostitute. And I submit to you that I don't think that's how God sees her. I don't think that's how God sees her. as Rahab the prostitute. I think that God sees her as an incredible part of his kingdom, as an amazing woman of faith, as precious, as loved, as a child, as seen. That's how God sees her, more than Rahab the prostitute. And it really reminded me of this other amazing woman, which I couldn't help but not share. Another very lesser well-known woman in the Old Testament. And her name is Hagar. Hagar was rejected and shunned by Abraham and Sarah, the very kind of famous characters in the Old Testament. A foreigner, Egyptian, left into the desert on her own. And you know, Hagar's the only person, not only woman, the only person in the Bible who gives God a name. The God who sees me. You are Elroy, the God who sees me. I find it so moving. You know, I've met many women who have been shunned and rejected and judged and treated as a commodity. It's so powerful to say there's a God who sees you. There's a God who sees you as a child, as a woman of faith, as made in the image of God, and as part of all God is doing in the world today. And maybe that's true for you. I find it very tender, the God who sees me. I am seen more than any other descriptor of me. And Rahab was actually in a very strategic location to be part of God's plan. She would have been in the city walls of Jericho. So she would have seen people coming in and out and known what's going on. So she was in a really strategic place. She was also, though, very literally on the margins of society. She's physically in the margins of society, not just culturally, emotionally. But let's see how the spies respond to her when they meet her. So we're going to go to the next slide, and hopefully it has. We might not go through all of it for the sake of time, actually, but we'll see. We'll go. So the king of Jericho was told, "Look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab. Note, the king now knows something about what Rahab's doing. "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them." But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan, and as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt." And it goes on, basically, how amazing your God is, right? It's incredible. Rahab, she's actually plotting against her own people here. She's made an incredibly courageous decision. Because, why? Because she's heard of a God, of another people, who set people free, who bring about freedom and restoration and redemption. She hears about that God, and she says, "I want that God. I want to be part of that." And actually, can you imagine, if she was found out for this, that's it for Rahab. There is absolutely nothing that would have saved her. The level of courage to do this is absolutely phenomenal. She wants God, and she is not going to let anything get in the way. She sees an opportunity, and she goes for it. And indeed, as I mentioned, the king, he actually knows what's already happening, and she lies to protect them. It's an incredible act of courage. But, again, I want to take us to this thing of, I sometimes I've been really thinking about how would the spies have thought about it? Whoa, okay, so suddenly you know who we are, okay, and now we're suddenly being protected by you, and you're a prostitute, and I don't really think you're sinful and immoral, and da-da-da, and now we're up there and hiding, and, it's kind of a crazy thing. But it reminds me, and this is my own, this could be a jump, but this is my own feeling on it, is it reminds me of, when Jesus met the woman at the well, very famous story of Jesus meeting the woman at the well, and there's a picture that comes up that might remind you. In that story, at one point, Jesus is talking to her, and the disciples come, and they say, hey, why are you talking to her? She's other. She's a woman. Why are you talking to her? And I feel this in this story, because there's a complete power dynamic shift that happens. Rahab had no power. Remember we said at the beginning of the story, she had no choice. She had no agency. In this moment, Rahab actually has a lot of agency. She is part of this upside down kingdom that turns things around. The king is coming to Rahab. Hey, what are you doing? Has the king ever spoken to Rahab? We don't know, but, kind of big. She is hiding the spies. She's saying, hey, you need to do this. You need to wait for that. You need to, she's the power dynamic has shifted. And I think it's quite similar to probably what happened with Jesus, the woman at the well. The disciples come, hey, why would you talk to her? Actually, that woman is the first person that Jesus reveals that he's the Messiah to. She's the first evangelist of that news. There's a turning upside down of the power dynamic. And it's such a Jesus thing. It's such a God thing for all of us, right? It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And she, in that place of sudden agency in her life, she then says the next thing. We go to the next slide. It says, now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father, mother, and whole family. Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us this land. Interesting dynamic of relationship here. She said, hey, look what I've done for you. I'm going to actually, who knows what's happened in her family history? As I said, it's very likely that they sold her into prostitution. And here now she's advocating for them. No, I want to bring them into that place too, my whole family. I want to be part of that lineage. And actually you see a dynamic here with those spies, which may not have been the conversation at the beginning of the meeting, but actually now they see her faith and they see her courage. So releasing the spies is an amazing thing. She lets out a red cord, a scarlet cord, out of the window, and they here, it's not a very good picture, sorry, but they climb out of the window out of a scarlet cord. Now, come on, sometimes you read things in the Bible and you're just like, God, you're just hilarious. You just had to make it so obvious, a scarlet cord. What could the color red and freedom remind us of? Well, we've got the context of the Passover, this whole story of the Israelites, would have to put blood over the door in order for, God to kind of pass over them, protect them. And then, of course, we have Jesus, the blood of the Lamb by which we have our redemption, we have our freedom. And here's Rahab, who we'll later find out becomes a very important part of the lineage of Jesus, putting out this scarlet cord out of the window of her, harlot home or whatever, a place of redemption. So beautiful. She's literally representing the Lord's protection. And in doing so, I'm just going to jump that actually. So when they then come, if we go to the next bit. No, I'm going to say this because I love this so much. Okay, so the thing that I really felt in this moment as well is of this thing of, again, like women in this time and in many places women today are not treated as made in the image of God, as made as an ally. And when we see Eve right at the beginning in Genesis, when it says, Eve will be a helper to Adam, the word there is actually generally used for God. It actually means ally. Azer kadegno is it in Hebrew, and it effectively means you are an ally. You are a helper. The word helper, azer, is generally used for God in the Bible. And so I won't go into too much detail because of time, but it's so powerful. That is how God created things to be, that men and women would be allies, that they would work together, different, but beautifully reflecting who God is. And I think this moment is like Rahab. She feels like an ally to them, Like, yes, I am part of this. I'm not lesser than you. So then 4 chapters later, we jump. And the Israelites come to Jericho, and they do all of their marching around Jericho and praying. Maybe you know the story. And the 7th time they go around, Jericho falls. But Rahab's city, or little section, doesn't fall. They are faithful. Joshua actually says, the leader says, go to the woman, to Rahab, who set you free, who protected you. They go, and the family come out with the rest of the Israelites. And what's interesting is it actually says in Joshua 4, it basically says that there was a camp made just outside for her. But then when it says later she lives among the Israelites, the actual word is like dwell, similar to the literal bowels of a creature, like babies in the womb. So she dwelled in the heart of the nation. This woman, foreigner, prostitute, outsider, becomes part of the very heart of the dwelling of the nation. And actually, scholars think that this is so sad, really. They think that it's very likely that her family would have left. That actually, even after them coming out, that they wouldn't have stayed with her. But she did. She was so faithful to this God. And she does become part of the dwelling place because she marries the son of a prominent leader called Salmon. Well, it's probably said much less like salmon in Hebrew. But anyway, and together, they have a son called Boaz. And Boaz is well known, right, as like, the redeeming man. If you want a husband like Boaz. He's like the good guy. There we go. Here's a bit of a lineage. So they have Boaz. Boaz and Ruth have Obed. And as it goes down, comes Jesus. Rahab is in the lineage of Jesus, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the one who turns all of this around, the beautiful Redeemer. There's Rahab in that genealogy. And we find her in the beginning of Matthew as they talk about the genealogy of Jesus. Again, so rare that you would have a woman, never mind a prostitute, right? She's there. She's there. And you even have her in Hebrews 11, which is the kind of whole thing about, the amazing people of faith in the Bible. She's there. In fact, she's mentioned right after Moses and instead of Joshua, the leader, who was there going around Jericho. It's a high honor. It's a high honor, this woman. And so just as we think and reflect, there's a couple of things that have really stuck out to me, if we go maybe to the next slide, is there are kind of 3 things for us personally. And the first is that I think God invites us into the center of redemption. Like, no matter your past, no matter how far you've been pushed to the margins, no matter what's been going on for you this week, what's been going on for you in the last 10 years, he wants to bring you into the center of redemption. The second is the kind of invitation of Rahab to be courageous, to be like, I'm going to be faithful to the Lord, no matter the judgment, no matter the injustice around me, no matter what people say, or kind of, even if I've got tiny opportunity, I'm going to be faithful with that. And the third is this really amazing thing that I actually heard someone share. They said, Jesus invites us to say, imagine if Rahab let out the red cord and said, go out that way. And then they said, nah. Jesus says, I've let out the red cord. Are you going to actually go out on it? Are you actually going to go to your freedom? And I mean that in a big way, like the big moment you say yes to Jesus, but also in the everyday ways, Do I actually take that out again, or do I stay in my place of, should I not? And actually, this week, I will say, I've had an extremely hard week. And you know what I did? I literally put a red cord out of my window this week as a representation of, do you know what? Jesus is going to pass over this, our house and our family. And so I have been deeply ministered by Rahab this week. And I really pray that you are too, as you hear the amazing beauty and transformation of Jesus. So Josh is going to come up now, and I'm just going to take some time to think and respond and reflect.